Evaluating down the upper thoracic spine, the ribs, and then pick up the arm in front of the elbow, circumduct the shoulder, evaluating the movement of the shoulder joint, and then goodbye Charlie to reseat the arm into the shoulder joint. Move to the other arm and the same thing, remembering not to push through any restrictions, just to allow the arm to roll over them. And then sit down yourself so that you are grounded and solid as you bring the thumbs onto the sacroiliac joints, asking your client to move to the left and to the right as you evaluate into the movement and the quality of movement in the SI joints. Slide your chair to the head of the table as your client lies down on their back, making sure that their head is supported. And that their arms are resting somewhere on their own body so their energy is circulating. You can adjust your client so they line up in the center of the table, connect with the tibia, with the shins, as you ground yourself. And a half moon at the feet, opening up the energy body and helping your client to get used to being on their back. Come to the pelvis, evaluate the SI joints from the ASIS, and then underneath, evaluating SI joints by palpating up into the joint space. Then evaluating the dorsal hinge, the lumbar vertebrae, and come down, placing the fulcrum into the sacral groove. Pause, coming off the body, allowing your client time to breathe, to integrate. And then the first pass, placing fulcrums into the lower ribs, the dorsal hinge. Moving down the transverse processes of the lumbar spine. 3 to 5 seconds on each fulcrum, watching for working signs. And then a fulcrum into the body of the sacrum. And come off. Allow that pass to integrate. Reconnect with yourself, with your own body system. And come back in for a second pass. Starting at the dorsal hinge. On ribs 10, 11, 12. And occasionally hanging out a little longer on a fulcrum in an area that you feel like something's just starting to move. And working down the transverse processes of the lumbar spine. Addressing the pelvis, this time by pressing into the ASIS, the anterior superior iliac spine, bringing the whole pelvis to the blue line, and then pressing down onto one side, back to the blue line, down on the other side, opening up the space in the SI joints. So you could repeat a third pass of the dorsal hinge to the sacrum. In this case, we move on to the hip fulcrums. Lifting, supporting under the knee and the ankle as you sit yourself down. And arrange your client's leg, resting on your hand and thigh. Evaluate internally, externally, internally, externally, remembering to finish on an internal evaluation. And again, supporting under the knee with your inside hand, really letting the knee nestle in. Taking the blue line of the whole body, straight traction from the shoulder, from the hip, internal rotation of the hip. And holding. And as you release, reconnect with your own body as you allow them to integrate. Watching for those deep breaths. Cradling under the knee. Blue line of the whole body. Traction from the shoulder, from the hip, and internal rotation with length. Releasing in the order that you came in. Third and final hip fulcrum on this side. Taking the time to set it up. Making sure your body's comfortable so that you can hold it with ease. And support under the knee and ankle as you put the leg back down. Lifting up the other leg, supporting under the knee, under the ankle. Your inside hand supporting under the knee. Blue line of the hip joint as you internally, externally evaluate. Rhythm, the pace of your fulcrums is in alignment with the working signs from your client. Taking that time to integrate, to take your hands off, to reconnect with yourself. Making sure that you're staying at interface. And then supporting under the knee and the ankle as you bring the leg back down and move down to the end of the table for the foot fulcrums, evaluating the movements of the tarsal joints. Bringing the foot to the blue line and then reading into the movement 3 times. Bringing the other foot to the blue line and reading in, evaluating tension or movement. And our 2-handed foot fulcrum, nestling over the tarsal joints. Getting your stance, your position comfortable. And then traction from the shoulder and little half moon scooping into the tarsal joints. As you release, letting that fulcrum integrate. And a little integrating movement before we go into a second foot fulcrum. Release, giving the body time to integrate the effects of the fulcrum itself. You can reevaluate, see if there's been any changes. And a third fulcrum. Moving on to the other foot, nestling your hands, draping them over the tarsal joints, traction from the shoulder, and then a half moon into the tarsal area. We get up to 3 fulcrums on each foot. Remembering to give a little space between the fulcrum and the integrating movement to allow the body to really soak up the effects of the fulcrum. And then a half moon at the feet to integrate all the work of the lower body. Move up to the head of the table. And sitting down, check in with your client. Ask them how they're doing. And a half moon at the head to say hello to the upper body. And then slide the hands under to evaluate the upper back. Evaluating the ribs from about T10 and up. And the neck evaluation. Evaluating now the upper cervical. First pass of fulcrums on the ribs of the upper back. Placing fulcrums wherever you noticed they were needed. And into the scapula. And a half moon at the head. And our second pass of fulcrums in the upper ribs. the shoulder joints. And a half moon with a twist. Bring the head back to the center. And a half moon with a twist in the other direction. And head back to the center, back to neutral. And giving time for the body to integrate. Those pauses are so important. Watching for those deep breaths. And then coming back in for a third pass. And then addressing the trapezius muscle. And a half moon at the head. Integrating that pass. And the arm fulcrums holding the hand as though you were shaking their hand, supporting above the elbow. And the other arm from the shoulder, from the elbow, and then integrating that movement. And then as you sit back down, checking in, asking if there's anywhere that needs a little more attention before closing. In this case, everything was good. So, a half moon at the head. And this is an integrating half moon. And then moving to the lower ribs. With a closing sequence, a half moon at the lower ribs. Half moon at the pelvis. And coming down to the end of the table so that you can reach under the knees to the popliteal fossa, creating a shallow half moon here. And then our final closing half moon, integrating the whole session. And making sure you have a clean, clear disconnect. And then stepping back and holding space. Giving your client time to be with the experience. Waiting for that final deep breath. Maybe a lick of the lips, signaling that integration has happened. And then suggest they roll over onto their side and sit up slowly. Letting them take time to make that transition